This lecture will serve as the introduction to ancient Chinese civilization, all the way back from the very beginnings of it up until about 200, 220 before the Common Era. When Chinese society begins, it is relatively isolated considering it's on the largest and most populated continent, and that's because of some deserts and some mountains in the west here. So the majority of the Chinese population, and this is true today, lives over here in the east. And just as other civilizations do, the Chinese civilization arises in river valleys. Specifically, in this case, the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. These two long rivers form the the spine, the backbone of China, and civilization begins around here. Now, when you take a broad look at Chinese history, it's often broken up into the different dynasties that have ruled China. And if you remember back from last chapter, the dynasty is like a ruling family where power is passed on within the family. So Chinese history is mostly broken up into the different dynasties that have ruled the area. And the first one that we have completely solid historical evidence for is the Shang Dynasty. The China that the Shang Dynasty ruled was smaller than the China today. They were essentially just that little triangle there. And what records we have of them show that they were harsh masters, or at least the records that we have depict them as harsh masters, as nasty rulers. And one other thing we know about them, because the artifacts tell us this, is they did this. They would write these characters on animal bones, and they would use them to, try and tell the future. It would be like reading the ancient version of reading palms and stuff like that. They would write down these characters on animal bones, throw them into the fire, see how they would crack, and then where the cracks were, that told you the answer to some question. So you wanted to know, how you wanted to know just some question about your future, and this is something they would do to try and learn it. But the Shang Dynasty supposedly gets real corrupt, and so they are overthrown by the Zhou Dynasty, which again controls what the parts of China that you see here. The Zhou Dynasty, as you can see, lasts for a very long time, and they are supposedly characterized by, instead of the Shang, who were, nasty and mean, the Zhou were decentralized. That is to say that the Duke of Zhou is the boss of China, but he doesn't have complete absolute power. The different states of China can do what they want, and he doesn't have great power over them. So it's a more decentralized government than the Shang was, and lasts for a really long time. Now, when the Zhou overthrew the Shang, they used as justification this idea, the mandate of heaven, which is an important one in Chinese history. This is where the dynasties got their legitimacy. That is to say, this is where the idea the dynasties used to justify their rule. And that was that a Chinese ruler, was supported by heaven, that heaven was in favor of the emperor until war, famine, or just other bad things, natural disasters, just when the economy went bad. The rulers were supported by heaven as long as things were well. Meaning that if things are going well in China, that's heaven's way of telling you the ruler is very good. If things start going bad, that is evidence that heaven has withdrawn their support, and then you're allowed to rebel. So essentially in China, as long as things are going well, you have to be good. But if things start going badly, that's when a rebellion is okay. And this pattern of one dynasty being overthrown by another is one you're going to see a lot as we go back and study China a couple different times. And this forms what historians call the dynastic cycle. This is a theory that what you're looking at right here, is what happens to all dynasties. Essentially, all governments go through a period of peace and prosperity where they're doing very well, and that lasts for some number of years. But then the dynasty gets too big, they overexpand, they get too ambitious, then they get corrupt. So the government starts to get too big and starts to rot from within. This causes the government to become bad. Once the government's bad, that's what causes rebellions. So then people rebel against the government, they overthrow it, and then a new dynasty comes in. And the new dynasty for a while is going to rule with peace and prosperity, and everything will be great, until they overexpand and they get corrupt, and so on and so on and so forth. This idea is that all of history can be understood as being a one step on this process, so that right now we are living in step 1 or step 2 or something like that, and that every sort of government goes through this cycle. Is that a fair view of history, or is that a little too simplistic? That might be the debate topic for tomorrow. Last but not least, I wanted to give you a very quick, sort of unfair overview of these 3 Chinese philosophies: Confucianism, Daoism, and legalism. We'll start with the most famous and probably the most important for Chinese history, and that is this fellow here, Confucius. Confucius was a person alive during the years that you see. He was a teacher. He was a teacher with thousands and thousands of students, and he created this school of thought that's not properly understood as a religion, but rather like a code of ethics. And what does he advocate? Well, moderation, that is not doing too much or too little of everything, sort of everything in moderation. Order, virtue, being good, everything being very orderly, and obedience to family and government. So obedience is a big thing in Confucianism. And he had this whole chart about, people that you're supposed to be obedient to, like students are supposed to be obedient to teachers. The ruled are supposed to be obedient to their rulers. Wives are supposed to be obedient to their husbands. And the most important one was right here: obedience to one's parents, or filial piety. Okay, this is like ultra important in China in general, and with Confucianism in particular. That is, it is very, very important to obey your elders, to obey the people who rank above you in society, especially one's parents. Confucian ideas have been famous in China since when he was around. They're very famous today, and these ideas of sort of obedience, not that everyone in China follows these rules, but there's just a strong current of this kind of thought in China even today. Now, different than that is Daoism. Daoism is the philosophy that gave us the yin and yang, and probably other parts of surfer culture. It's the Tao. The word Tao means like the way of the universe, sort of this, this current, this way of nature that Taoism is supposed to tap into. And unlike Confucianism, it's not practical. It's not like, go to school, listen to your parents, and get good grades, like Confucianism says. Taoism says, the world is sort of romantic, it's mystical, it's very sort of mysterious. Human beings are good. This is huge. Taoism views human beings are good, so social convention and government authority that try to control people is bad. So it's bad. The government trying to control people is bad because since people are good, according to Taoism, since people are good, the more you let them do what they want, the better everyone will be. So the less laws you have, the happier everyone will be, because you just let people do what they want, and people basically want to do good things, and everything will be great, and we'll all just chill out, and hey, just, chill, man, go with the universe, what do you want to do today? Oh, whatever, I want to sit under a tree. That's Taoism. Now, totally opposed to that, and finally on our lecture, is legalism. This is a different philosophy, basically the exact opposite of Taoism. It says that human nature is evil. People are evil. Therefore, the government has to be very authoritarian. That is to say, the government has to be very strong, very involved in people's lives and tell them what to do. Needs to use harsh punishments to punish them if they get out of line, because since people are evil, if you let them do what they want, it's not going to be Taoism, everyone dancing around a tree. It's going to be, mass chaos and horribleness. So you need to very strictly control people in order to have any kind of order, any kind of peace. So legalism is like imagine like the strictest teacher you've ever had. That's legalism, whereas Taoism is more like, oh, let's all do what we feel like doing. So that's legalism and Taoism, and then Confucianism tries to sort of find this middle way of, obedience, but at the same time not as overboard as legalism, or rather not viewing human nature as evil the way that legalism does. So you get Confucianism, Taoism, legalism. I want you to know the Shang Dynasty and the Zhou Dynasty. Don't forget the Mandate of Heaven, and do not forget the Dynastic cycle. And that's our lecture.